Hello, everyone. This is the 168th episode of the Soccer Nostalgia Talk Podcast. As always, this is Sean from Los Angeles and the Soccer Nostalgia blog. For this episode, I interview Belgian football fans, Mr. Jeffery Goeman and Mr. Bart Bollaert, as we discuss the Belgium national team during the 1984 Euro qualifiers. Welcome to both of you.
Hello.
Nice to have me.
Can you introduce yourselves and your trajectory into football?
Go ahead, Bart.
Okay. I'm a football fan from a child. When I started watching football about the age of 6, so that's 79, when in Belgium Beveren became champion. And of course, yeah, we were spoiled in the 1980s. We had a Belgian team that was second in the European Championship. We had a very good team at that moment. I think that was also the years afterwards, but maybe 84 was a bit of deception, but we'll come later on it. But yeah, call me a football fan. I've played football myself for many years. Then I was coach for several years. But now I'm just following the football a bit from behind. There are very many matches, maybe a bit too much. That's how I look at football now. But as a kid, I was really watching almost everything.
My trajectory is a bit the same. I started as a little football player when I was 6, was 78. The first games of the national team, I started following at the Euro 80, of course, with the results they have. So that right away attracted me, especially to the national team. And around the same period, also exactly the same period, 1980, because I'm from Ghent. Our local team, they went to the first division after many, many years. That also brought us back to the stadium in Ghent. So I started actively, like was around 8. We went to many games. I went to see a lot of games with my father, local team and national team games. But one way or the other, I was always more attracted to the national team, and I followed them up closely. But the same as Bart was saying, that was for me during my youth, the high period of watching football. As for me, also, it's the same. I'm back in football now as a manager of more a local team around Ghent. But there's too many games, too many games. If you don't need to do it in a professional way, you have to follow too much to know everything. So to me, but maybe to a lot of people, it was more exciting in our youth. We had to go look up more things to know everything. Now, I mean, you just turn on Google, you want something, you find it, look on the TV, and you can see it 3 times a day, the same game. To me, it's not exciting anymore as it was.
Let's go back in time. Let's go to the fall of 1982. What was the status of the Belgium national team after a relatively successful performance in the 1982 World Cup?
I think the first round was very successful, but in the second round, I believe we played Poland and Russia. Boniek humiliated us himself with 3 goals. I had the feeling that the first match against Argentina was great, but after that we had to struggle to go to the next round. So it was successful in the sense I believe that it was the first time that we went to the second round, but I don't think there was euphoria in Belgium afterwards. There was also a
But
bit of deception.
it was a bit of double feeling. I mean, overall, I think, again, the first game against Argentina, maybe if you see it in a whole, first playing against the former world champion of 78 in an opening game, winning that game was maybe the greatest achievement we ever had. And if we saw there was a program here, I think 2 years ago, where they said tactically it was the best game the Red Devils ever played. But after that, you saw the difference between, for example, Belgium, Germany, even France. We weren't professional enough. So afterwards, it was a bit a double feeling. They were happy, like you said, to have the reach the second round, but they also realized something needed to change. I think the next few seasons it started to. I remember the game against Poland, Boniek. There was later on defenders saying the name of Boniek wasn't even in the tactical speech of the coach before the game. So, okay, he was still playing in Poland, but still, that showed a bit how it was at the time. Eh? And then later on, this guy scores 3 goals, and it ruined one of our keepers' careers.
Yes.
What was the position of the Belgian manager Gitis after second place in the 1980 Euros and this 1982 World Cup, where he at least managed to qualify Belgium to the second round?
I think his position was fine because we cannot underestimate at the time was the power of mainly 2 journalists, which was Jan Waters, the radio journalist,
Yeah.
and Rick de Sadler, the guy who did the games on TV. They were both very friendly with Thijs, having a whiskey at the bar, it was famous. A lot of times it was said that it was those guys, who decided who was in the team. I think that was a bit too much of it, but they had a big influence. So as they were very friendly with him, I mean, he wasn't much criticized. If there was critics whatsoever, it was more maybe on certain players or how certain things were handled by players. But on Kitais, there was not so many criticisms. So his position, I think, was never asked in question.
Yeah, I agree. I think that he was a good influencer, I think, as well, towards these journalists, and he was smart and he knew how to handle this. But his position was not on fire, that's true.
I mean, afterwards, you realize what he did great. These journalists probably thought they had this influence on him. He was the perfect liaison between those guys of the press and the players, and he wanted everybody to have the feeling they wanted to have. But in the end, believe me, it was he who made the decisions. As Bart says, very, very wise guy, and he did very well.
Now, after this World Cup, Belgium would have to do without the veteran Wilfried van Moor, who had kick-started Belgium's renewal under Thijs after his recall in 1979. Was there a worry as a result?
I don't think so, because first of all, Wilfried was very important in going into Euro 80 and at the Euros itself. But later on, he became an older player. Even in 82, it was known that Thijs took him there because he was very important in 80. They had a respect for each other, and Wilfried also liked his whiskey. So for that, there was a reason. Also, not so much for the dressing room, because maybe as a footballer, but Wilfried wasn't the biggest talker. So certainly after 82, the team has grown to a certain position, and Wilfried was very important to bring it there. But after 82, it was certainly not really a worry.
No, I don't think either. He has his age, and I think they both knew he was important as a kind of influencer in the team. He had done a great job before, and I think that was a kind of recognition. But at a certain moment, yeah, it stops.
Yeah. The most important thing was on the field. He was the glue that made it a team.
Yeah.
So in the meantime, there was other big players that had risen up and had become to a level that was good enough to keep the team where it was supposed to be.
Yeah.
We have to remind everyone that around this time, Belgium's main tactic was the offside trap, that they used it efficiently. So at this point, we can say perhaps the key players were Gerrits and Muse in defense in using this tactic that had served them well in the last few years.
That offside they were playing, actually, there was an idea from the previous coach, Raymond Houtals, and they just took it over. Of course, the players that were there, certainly Walter Muse, who was the libero, as we call it, he was very important and he did it very well. But if you can see, we'll talk later on about that, the backbone became, except for Paf, importantly from the standard team, who played champions in those years 2 times in a row. That was managed by Raymond Houtals at the time. So that was a big advantage because a lot of things what he was doing with his team, those guys went to the national team. They knew how to play it. So what they could do at their local team, they could do in the national team. So they were used to do it. That was a very big advantage at the time.
But there were many other good defenders as well. Luc
Yeah.
Millekams, Michel Rankin. These were tough guys. If they had to fight, they would do it. They would do it also for Thijs, just at a certain moment.
But Thijs was very good. If you mentioned the name Millekams, pure as a footballer, he was probably, not at the best 11 in Belgium. I mean, he
No.
was not even a professional. Imagine that. Those times, a lot of players did the job during the day. Then in the evening, they went
Yeah.
training and had a game on the weekend. And Millekams was one of them. But, he was a guy, defense was different. There was more man-to-man marking at those times. Yeah, he was a guy, if you said, okay, you hold this guy out of the game, he just would do it. Apparently, also, that's what I hear afterwards. Even if he was not professional and playing in a team like Wareham at the time, he was technically very strong. That means if tactics were explained, he just did what needed to be done. He was like a bit the Claudio Gentili of the Belgium team.
Other standouts were the Anderlecht captain Frank Vercautern, Ludo Cook, the new Anderlecht strike force of Erwin Vandenberg and Alex Jernatinsky, Francois van der Elst, who was playing at West Ham around this time, and of course, Jan Sulemans up front. So, good, strong side. For this 1984 Euros qualifiers, Belgium were in a relatively balanced group along with Scotland, East Germany, and Switzerland. I imagine after qualifying for the 1980 Euros and the 1982 World Cup, they would have been looked upon as favorites, perhaps with Scotland, to qualify.
Yes, correct. That Belgium should qualify at that time. With that team, that was the goal, the expectation.
Yeah, they had to, but of course there was only one team. Okay, there was only 4 teams in the group, but one team that would qualify because there was only 8 teams in the Euros. Very different from nowadays. But it was typical Belgium. We were always at the strongest if we put ourselves in an underdog position. And I remember we at home, I remember my father, yeah, we had to qualify. But on the TV they would say, Scotland, they have their stars, Dalglish, Souness. You know who were winning European Cups? The EC1 Cup, not the EC2 Cup like we won. So whatever happened, we always put ourselves in an underdog position. But in the end, we knew if everything ran normal, if we had no big injuries, also very important, that we should qualify.
Belgium starts that season with a friendly against West Germany at Munich. And of course, this is the West Germany of Karl-Heinz Rummenigge, Stielicke, the Forster brothers, a young Lothar Matthäus, and Schumacher in goal. This match ends in a scoreless tie, and the only novelty was Ivan Host of Tongeren playing in his one and only cap for Belgium. He played the last 9 minutes as Belgium would play their first qualifier a few weeks later. On October 6th, 1982, at Heysel at Brussels, Belgium started its qualification campaign against Switzerland. For this match, we have the following lineup for Belgium. Jean-Marc Pfaff, who had joined Bayern Munich that season, starts in goal. Captain of the team, Eric Gerrit of Standard Liège. Joseph Darden of Standard Liège. Walter Muse of Standard Liège. Mark Bach of Beveren. Frank Vercauteren of Anderlecht. Alex Jernatinsky of Anderlecht. Guy van der Missen of Standard Liège. Erwin Vandenberg of Anderlecht. Ludo Cook of Anderlecht, and Jan Sulemans of Club Brugge. Belgium took the lead as early as the second minute when Vercauteren took a free kick on the left side, and that was diverted into his own net by the Swiss player Hans Ludi. Early in the second half, in the 48th minute, Ludo Cook scored with one of his trademark long-range shots from outside of the box. And before the end, in the 82nd minute, Vercauteren sent Vandenberg through to score Belgium's third. So, first match and a first comprehensive win. And Belgium were on track for qualification.
Certainly, this match and few ones to follow, we had an amazing cook. He was carrying the midfield. What he was showing, certainly had a few games in 82. He was showing it also with Anderlecht that year, the year before. They reached the semis against Aston Villa. And that year they would go on to win the cup. So he was in very big form. He was the liaison between the defense, which obviously did very well, keeping the nil towards the attack. And yeah, to me, it's still something I say to a lot of young players today. If we talk about the golden generation we have, the striker we had with Van den Berg at that time, a lot of people don't know him anymore, but maybe they would like to hear it. But to me, he was much better than Lukaku is today. But those guys, it was different. I remember Van Berg, he could go to Barcelona at the time, but he rather choose just going over the border in France.
Yes,
He was
correct.
the old Flemish boys.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think, I remember the game very well. It was a very comfortable win. For the match, they were not scared. They knew they had to win the game. But Switzerland was a team we didn't know a lot about. They didn't have no high flyers players, no big games to mention, but they were always a difficult one to play. They were a bit kind of like they are a country, very neutral. Don't know what to think about it, how they are. But I mean, if you look at the players, there were no big names or anything in it. But as a team, they were always pretty strong. So it was a good win.
Belgium's next match is again at home at Heysel at Brussels against Scotland. This is a Scotland, some familiar names: Kenny Dalglish, Graham Souness, Steve Archibald, Gordon Strachan. For this match, we have the following lineup: Faf, Gerrit, captain of the team; Darden, Muse, Baek, Vercauteren. He'd be replaced by René Verheyen of Lokeren in the 64th minute. Francois van der Elst of West Ham in England. Van der Miesen, Vandenberg. He'd be replaced by Maurice de Schrijver of Lokeren in the 86th minute. This was de Schrijver's fourth and final cap for Belgium, all of them in 1982. Then we have Ludo Cook and Jan Sulemans. In this match, Scotland takes the lead in the 13th minute through Kenny Dalglish. From the middle, he passed to Archibald on the left, who passed it back across to Dalglish, who scored. Belgium ties the match in the 25th minute. Vercauteren crossed from the left side and Vandenberg struck in the cross. Scotland takes the lead again in the 35th minute. Dalglish again, he received the ball on the right side. He turned and then curled the shot past Faf.
Super goal.
Yes. But just a few minutes later, in the 38th minute, Belgium ties the match again. From the middle, Sulemans passed to Van der Elst on the right side, who then shot from the edge of the box past Jim Leighton. So match is 2-2. We go to the second half. In the 63rd minute, Belgium scores the winner. There was a cross from the right side, and Francois van der Elst scored his second goal, and Belgium were winners. However, there was still drama left. In the 78th minute, Scotland were awarded a penalty kick. Pfaff rose to the occasion, and he saved Frankie Gray's penalty kick and earned the win for Belgium. So 2 matches, 2 wins, very exciting match.
It showed the mental strength of the team. You are behind 2 times, you come back 2 times. I think at Brussels at the Hazel, as always, a Belgian, when it's at home, he feels much more comfortable. But I believe when you mentioned the names, all these guys, also the guys that playing at Standard and Lokeren at that time, that were good teams also on European level. And we had Anderlecht, so we had mentally strong players at all levels of the field. Very important. And the win itself, yeah, okay. Jean-Marie Pfaff will of course say that he did it, but I think you always need a bit of luck catching a penalty. But yeah, when I hear the lineup again, that's guys that know what they are doing and in the head, very strong.
Yeah, I remember I was there at the game, but both sides were exciting. Dalglish, maybe the best British player that ever was. Very young people, no guy like Dalglish, but he's still called King Kenny at Liverpool. The best player now, maybe after Gerrard, but whoever was. If you see that, even that the first and the second goal, that was world class. The mentality, which Bart said, mental part, very true. But another very important thing is they were friends. In those times, if you hear interviews now, players that played with the national team in those times, they like to go to the national team. They were a team of friends. During the competition, they were rivals of each other. But different to the 70s, they like to go to the Red Devils. And you saw that. And then, of course, yeah, Jean-Marie was Jean-Marie. I mean, you had a lot of pros and cons. I was always a big fan of Jean-Marie, and you had to look a bit next to certain things that he did or he was, but he was a fabulous goalkeeper. I mean, in those times, to be a goalkeeper in Bayern Munich, when you can only have two, three foreigners in a team, that was not so obvious. Now with Courtois, okay, it's Real Madrid, but a lot of these big teams, they have foreign goalkeepers. And those times, to give a keeper from another country, it was not so normal. And of course, like Bart said, Jean-Marie would always get attention to him. But he had certain tricks, or even it wasn't a trick before the game, afterwards he'd say, oh, I did it this way or that way. But he was called Simpatico later on. But in a way, it was good. They had a guy like this in goal. And the main thing is, yeah, he got them results. And when they needed him, he was there. And in this game, he was certainly there.
Yeah, indeed.
Getting back to Faf, we have to remind ourselves that he had been heavily criticized for his behavior during the 1982 World Cup. So, did this performance, in a way, redeem him with the rest of the team?
In 82 against Hungary, they blamed him because the intervention he did when later on he knocked himself out and Garrett's, which, handicapped the team. He got some critics for it. And also, like Bart just said, in one way or another, he always tried to put the attention on him. But I think after this game, getting that attention, they also realized sometimes it would go against them. And another time he will lift the team. And if you remember 80, he helped them in the final. And in the final, maybe the last goal.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he should have been there. If they do interviews now with players of those times, they say, okay, but we forgive him, man, because without him, we weren't there. In 86, first goal of Maradona, needed to be there. Rick de Sadler even mentions it in the comments. But without Puff, we would never been in the semi-final in 86. So, wherever Puff would be, even in Munich, there was always going to be discussions. But in the end, everybody said, he was a great goalkeeper.
Yep, that's true. I can imagine that yeah, for some people in the group, some maybe won't have liked him too much, but if you win in the end, yeah, that's what counts.
Yeah, and a keeper is an individual.
Yeah.
I mean, up front, you can miss chances. It doesn't mean you're going to lose a game. Even if you make mistakes in the back, you're a keeper. And Puff was a guy who he handled it in his own way. I remember he went to Munich in his first game. They got a goal in. They threw it from the side. If he just let it in the goal, it doesn't count. I think it was Werder Bremen.
Yes.
And he knocked it in. That was his first game. Another keeper, it would take maybe 6 months to come above that. But he just, I think, the week or 2 weeks after, he won a holding a penalty from Kaltz, who didn't miss a lot in Hamburg, and he won the game. And that was that famous interview in his first German. You
Yes.
know, once in a while, if I want to laugh, I still look at it. But yeah, this was Jean-Marie. Huh?
As we come to the spring of 1983, Belgian club Waterschei is making waves in Europe. They eliminate Paris Saint-Germain in the Cup Winners' Cup. Eventually, they face Aberdeen in the semifinals of the Cup Winners' Cup. And you have the star-studded Anderlecht team who would go on to win the UEFA Cup that season. Was this a reflection of the renaissance of Belgian football of these few years?
I think at that time, yeah, we had many good players, and I think apparently financially it was attractive to play in Belgium. If you see what kind of players that could come to Belgium, I think even Horst Rubesch, who scored against us in 1980, went to Standard, etc. So let's say that economically, apparently it was a good period for football players, but Waterschei also had, in my opinion, good players like Heinz Grundl. Yeah, that was good for us, and that made it everything. Yeah, when you are successful, yeah, people want to be part of the success. Was it a renaissance? Yeah, I think it was a very good period. Anderlecht, Standard, Bruges, yeah, and then yeah, you see that other teams, don't forget, yeah, that at that time you also had a team like Lokeren, which is also just a small village city here in our region. They had Lato, Preben Larsen. That was a period, eh?
Yeah. I lived for 2 years in Lokeren, and Lubanski lived in
And
my
Lubanski.
school,
Yeah.
and he came from Poland. I played myself in Lokeren, 9 years later on for 2 years. But then, okay, they still had a good team, but not like in the early 80s. But in the end, what Bart was saying, we will come back to it. What made football great in Belgium was black money. Eh? A lot of players, good players came here, made good money. But later on, when with the Bellemans affair, it changed a lot. Eh? But Renaissance, I wouldn't call it. We were already on a good track, and it was good that teams like Waterschei later on war again, Beveren,
Yeah.
you name them, eh? Winterslag, who beat Arsenal at the time. That little teams like that, they'd also have huge results in Europe. I mean, we were a strong competition. I remember Anderlecht when they had to go to Kortrijk or stuff like that. A lot of times they lost, or to Waregem. And that's also why you had players of those teams in the national team. Eh? Great days.
Mhm.
Yes.
We come to the spring of 83, and there's the double clash against East Germany in March and April. On March 30th, you have the first trip away from home at Leipzig at Zentralstadion. For this match, Pfaff is missing, so we have Jacques Munaron of Anderlecht starting in goal. Then you have Gerets, captain of the team, Luc Milkamps of Vargem, making his first appearance of the season, Walter Muse. He'd be replaced by international debutant Leo Kleisters of Waterschei in the 85th minute. Michel de Groete of Anderlecht. He'd be replaced by Mark Bike in the 46th minute. Verkouteren, Francois van der Elst, Van der Miesen, Vandenberg, Cook, and Sulemans in his first away match from home. Belgium will take the lead in the 36th minute. There's a cross from the right side, and Van der Els heads it in. Belgium would double the lead in the 69th minute. Van der Miesen crosses from the right side, and this time Vandenberg heads in the second goal. Just before the end, East German veteran Joachim Streich takes an indirect free kick, and I believe it's deflected by Sulemans in the wall. It deflects into the net. Late goal, but Belgium holds on to the win and they win this match 2-1. 3 matches, 3 wins. The next clash against East Germany is at home at Brussels at Heysel on April 27th. For this match, Faf is back. Starting, you have Gerrits, captain of the team, Luc Milkamps, Muse, De Groot, Verkautern, Van der Elst, Van der Missen, Vandenberg, Cook, and Sulemans. In this match, East Germany takes the lead. And it's again Strach, and it's again, this time with a direct free kick. But his free kick, and again, his free kick is again deflected, this time by Van der Missen. And East Germany takes the lead. However, Belgium ties the match in the 18th minute. A corner kick from the right side is headed in by Sulemans. Belgium scores the winner in the 38th minute. And again, it's Ludo Cook and another one of his long range shots. And Belgium again wins 2-1. 4 matches, 4 wins. After this, was it more or less a formality that Belgium had qualified for the Euros?
I think they were. If you saw the other results of the teams after those 4 games, I think they were qualified. Of course, again, typical Belgium. They would say, if it's mathematical, not 100%.
Yeah, we still needed 1 point, I think,
Yeah.
and
That was
then we
it.
are good at maths.
They knew they were going to do it. But I remember going to East Germany. I can't remember they were showing that game live on TV in those times. It wasn't like that, certainly when they were going to East Germany. I even still think that game at home against East Germany, if we saw it fully on the TV, because in those times, not all games were live on television. And sometimes we had it on Flemish TV or the Flemish part, it's called BRT. A lot of games were on RTL. So if it was on RTL, we had to look at it in French. If we had it on the TV yet, at the cable. So it's not like it is now. But who was going to, after 4 wins with this team, I think it was clear we were qualified. And I remember that goal of Cook against Eastern Germany at home. That's the Cook image, I think, who he was, very beautiful player, if you know what happened to him later on. That was Cook, his smile, his looks, super player, very attractive to watch. They compared him a lot with Van der Eycken at the time. Van der Eycken was also a great player, but Cook was more beautiful to watch, walking straight, and was a big miss later on. I remember as a kid that I cried a lot. I wasn't an Anderlecht supporter, but I was a big fan of Cook. He was in Italy at the time already, but yeah, it was a big loss in Belgian football. And that goal, it was those goals that made sure he was remembered.
We come to the end of the 1982-83 season, and there's a friendly on May 31st. That's to celebrate Luxembourg's 75th year anniversary of their federation. So you have France and Belgium facing each other. This is a French side without Michel Platini, but nevertheless have some of the big names like Patrick Battiston, Manuel Amoros, Luis Fernandez, and Didier Six, who had a stint at Cercle Bruges. As far as Belgium, you have the international debut of Mark van der Linden of Antwerp, who really would make his breakthrough in the post 1988 era. That's when he would be at his best and would later join Anderlecht. This was his first match, and Eddie Woerdekers of Waterschei also plays in this match, along with Michel de Wolf of Molenbeek. And it's also important to note that this is the last match with that famous Admiral kit, as Belgium would soon adopt Adidas. This match ended as a 1-1 tie. Didier Six scored for France, and a minute later, Eddie Woerdeker scored for Belgium. This 82-83 season was over. We come to the final phase of the qualification. We come to the 1983-84 season. For his first match of the season, it's again another friendly. this time against the Dutch neighbors, wearing blue shirts for this match
Mm.
on September 21st, 1983. You have a lot of familiar faces in the Dutch team who would go on to be superstars like Ruud Gullit, the young Ronald Koeman, Frank Rijkaard, Marco van Basten, among others. You have the veteran Willy van der Kerkhoff, and making his international debut, future Anderlecht standout Adrie van Tichelen. So in this match, that Belgium, they wear Adidas for the first time. Match ends in a 1-1 tie. Van Basten scores for the Dutch, and Eddie Woodekers scores for Belgium in the 74th minute. So we come to the key qualifier against Scotland on October 12th, 1983. That, as you mentioned, Belgium only needs 1 point to qualify. This match at Glasgow at Hampden Park. We have the following lineup for Belgium, wearing those beautiful white kits for the first time. We have Faf in goal, Eric Garrett, captain of the team, who now was playing for AC Milan in Italy. Luke Milkamps, Walter Muse. He'd be replaced by Michel de Wolf of Ghent in the 76th minute. Making his international debut and playing in his only match for Belgium, Michel Vintak of Standard Liège. Then you have Frank Vercauteren, Francois van der Elst, who joined Lokeren that season. Making his international debut, Nico Clayson of Sereng. Is that the correct pronunciation?
Yes,
Sereng?
Yeah,
Seren,
Seren.
yes.
Mm.
Yeah. Then you have Eddie Woodekers of Waterschei, Ludo Cook, who had joined Inter in Italy. So both Gerets and Cook were playing for Milan clubs this season, and Jan Sulemans. In this match, Belgium takes the lead in the 30th minute. Claeson's cross from the right side was struck by, I believe it was Sulemans, and his shot was touched by Leighton and it hit the post, and Vercauteren headed in the loose ball. Scotland ties the match in the 50th minute when Vintak's erroneous pass. So perhaps that's why he only played one match for
Okay.
Belgium. Yeah. But yeah, his pass was picked up by Charlie Nicholas. The ball bounced to Dalglish, and he lofted the ball in the path of Nicholas, who shot past Pfaff, and Scotland tied the match. So the match ended as a 1-1 tie, but Belgium had the 1 point that they needed and qualified for the Euros. To round out the qualifiers, there's a one final match against Switzerland on November 9th that I have not been able to find any footage from this match.
No,
Yeah.
there isn't.
So this match on November 9th at Bern for Belgium, we have Faf, Gerrits, Milkamps playing in his final cap for Belgium, his 35th and final cap. His first cap was in 1979. We have Muse, Raymond Moments of Lokeren, Vercauteren, Francois van der Elst, he replaced by Van der Miesen in the 46th minute. Ludo Cook, he'd replaced by Nico Clayson in the 64th minute. Sulemans and Vandenberg. Switzerland wins this match 3-1. That was inconsequential for Belgium. Marco Schalibom scores in the 24th minute. Vandenberg ties the match in the 64th minute. Jean-Paul Briget scores Switzerland's second goal in the 76th minute, and Alan Geiger scores the third goal for Switzerland in the 82nd minute. Belgium qualifies with 4 wins, 1 tie, and 1 loss in the qualifiers. I mentioned this was Luc Milkamp's final cap for Belgium. Do you know, was there any reason why Gitais lost faith in Milkamps, who was a regular for all these years?
One of the main reasons, before he missed out on a few games, he had an injury. He came back from it. But later on, he had one again, a little bit after that game, which also took him out of the Wargam side at the time. That was one of the reasons. And also, I think the system within the team started changing a bit. That was one of the reasons. Maybe that last game, we don't have any footage. I would ever think that Gites would, certainly a guy like Milikamps, take it on one game and also probably a game they didn't have to win no more. So I think that it was both injuries just before where he missed a few matches and afterwards where it was his last game and he didn't came back. Although it was very strange in 84 one day, when we went to the Euros, we had, of course, defense problems because of the reasons we will discuss in a bit. But still, I think he wasn't fully 100% the Millicamps apparently that he was before.
As I mentioned, also, Gerets and Ludo Quek were playing in the Italian Serie A, which was the best league in the world at the time, but they were somewhat struggling. What was the view from the Belgian press regarding their performances in Italy?
It was not like today, eh? Mostly when we hear something or we saw something of those players, it was not like, it was every week. I think Gerrits was playing in AC Milan. Cook wasn't in Inter, but he was back. He always had, little injuries. I mean, starting, I think it was 76 when he had a big injury against West Ham. But also, he had to stay on the field. It kept following him through his career. That was the main, of course, yeah, you could only have two players in the squad in Italy, foreigners at that time, which was already tough enough. It kept following. I also knew that, Cook, he had some personal problems with his marriage and stuff. Of course, it's never a good thing to have, certainly when you're away in another country. You need all the help you can get. But in the press, you didn't hear too much about it. Later on with developments, yeah, then it started changing. But when they were playing there, I mean, my feeling is Cook was struggling because of the reasons I just told you, and Gerrits was just doing fine. He was in the team in Milan.
Yes, and I also think maybe something more Belgian, the adaptation, going to another country, we were not really used to that, nor did the players, I think. It was maybe more surprising for them, even when you are Ludo Cook or Eric Gerrits. It was more surprising to them, the new situation, than maybe we can imagine that.
But I mean, I don't know, Shahan, if you know the story about Keulemans.
Oh, yes,
Uh,
after the 80
he,
Euros, yeah. He
yeah,
could
he
have
was in
gone to
Milan,
AC
eh?
Milan. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and in the end, he stayed
Mm,
in Bruges.
mm.
That was, typical Flemish boys, eh?
Yeah.
But of course, I mean, I know later on the difference what they offered him in Milan and what in the end he got in Bruges. There was a difference, but not like now. Now, they can go play, 5 times, 10 times. You know what they make here? In those times, Bruges gave him a contract. And believe me, in Italy it was big, but not double. So then these guys are, well, okay, we'll stay with the family here. You know what we eat every day. We speak our own language. Yeah, the Dutch players, were always different. Eh? That's why I'm half Dutch. I would go in a minute. That's why I always traveled around the world as well.
Gitais, he experimented very little in these
Hmm.
qualifiers. Was his squad essentially made up in his mind?
I think, yes. I
Hmm.
think Guita's, he thought it out very well. And yeah, I also had the feeling that he was always looking for a good balance and a stability. And if he, in his mind, said, I need these guys for what I want, then I take these guys, even when they are maybe not playing very well in their own team, he would take them.
Yeah, and that's what got him the results through the years. That was the strength in those times. Even if you were a little boy, you could say, okay, that's going to be the team tonight. Eh?
Yeah,
The only thing I remember, and I don't know exactly the reason, there was issues with the number five position. Of course, Ronquin, who later came back in Mexico, was a strong one in 80, and then Baker replaced him. But I don't know, because if you see, you had the Grote in those qualifiers, you had Wintag that one game. But I still remember it was in the papers. Everything is set for Thijs' team except the number five position. But I don't know, was Baker a little injured or did he play as well? Because Beveren, they were doing very well at the time. So I don't know the reason behind that anymore. But I remember that was the only issue, the number five position. And for the rest, I think on every position he knew. And if a guy was injured, he probably had another guy for those positions. But it was very clear normally the 11 or 12 players that were going to be there with Tays. And that was the strength of this team.
Of course, we know what happens early the next year, and we'll discuss that in depth in our next discussion. However, with that in mind, perhaps looking back, obviously it's easy to look back. Maybe he probably perhaps should have maybe experimented more, but there's no way you could have known what was gonna happen. That's the thing.
correct. Yeah, you cannot foresee that.
Yeah.
And
So
also now, sometimes, they play 7, 8, 10 times a year. In those times, you had very few games. So you didn't have many times to experiment. Eh? Yeah, yeah, it was a bad thing that happened because I think otherwise in '84 it could have been very good.
of course, we're referring to the Standard Waterschei scandal of the following February that would have ramifications on Belgium's Euros in 1984. And like I said, we will discuss that in depth in our next podcast, which will be about the actual Euros itself. But for now, in closing, as this year 1983 ends, were Belgium regarded as one of the favorites for the upcoming 1984 Euros?
I would refer to what Jeffrey said before. We like to be in an underdog position. I don't know what other countries said, but it's true that we had a good team. But believing that we could win, oh, that I cannot remember. That I don't think. More as an underdog, and we see where we get.
One thing I remember, as soon as the groups were set, France wasn't happy we were in the group. Eh? They had a great '82 also, but they didn't forget the qualifiers for '82. Eh? One of the best games I was there we ever played, at home against France 2-0. We were very strong. But yeah, we are not Dutch. Eh? We would never see ourselves favorites. Eh? But I'm sure we knew we had a chance to go the same thing that we did in '80. Of course, yeah, France, they played at home, eh? So we also knew that. But I think after France, we had a good chance. We knew, if you're second in
Yeah,
the group, you can go to the semis, and in the final, you never know what happens. Eh? Yeah, and on the other side, yeah, there was only Germany in the end. Yeah, okay, we'll discuss that later. We know what happened with them in '84. Eh? But out of the 8 teams that qualified, I think we certainly had a chance. And the press didn't say so much because that's the way our press was and we Belgians are. But I think within the players group, we had big hopes.
With that, I would like to thank both of you for your participation in this interview, and all our respective contact information is listed on the blog and podcast uploads. So, thank you once again, and we'll pick up the 1984 Euros in our next discussion and hope to continue these discussions on football history. So, thank you once again.
Okay, look
yeah,
forward to it.
yeah. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.